Part 1, Chapter 17 of the Daisy Chain. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nancy Cochran Gergen, Gilbert, Arizona. The Daisy Chain by Charlotte Mary Yonge, Part 1, Chapter 17. Gently supported by the ready aid of loving hands, whose little work of toil her grateful prodigality repaid, with all the benediction of her smile, she turned her failing feet to the softly cushioned seat, dispensing kindly greetings all the time. R. M. Milnes. 3 great events signalized the month of January. The first was the opening of the school at Coxmore, whither a cart transported half a dozen forms, various books, and 3 dozen plum buns, Margaret's contribution, in order that the school might begin with éclat. There walked Mr. Wilmot, Richard, and Flora, with Mary, in a jumping, capering state of delight, and Ethel, not knowing whether she rejoiced. She kept apart from the rest and hardly spoke, for this long probation had impressed her with a sense of responsibility, and she knew that it was a great work to which she had set her hand, a work in which she must persevere, and in which she could not succeed in her own strength. She took hold of Flora's hand and squeezed it hard, in a fit of shyness, when they came upon the hamlet and saw the children watching for them. And when they reached the house, she would fain have shrank into nothing. There was a swelling of heart that seemed to overwhelm and stifle her, and the effect of which was to keep her standing unhelpful when the others were busy bringing in the benches and settling the room. It was a tidy room, but it seemed very small when they arranged the benches and opened the door to the 27 children and the 4 or 5 women who stood waiting. Ethel felt some dismay when they all came pushing in, without order or civility, and would have been utterly at a loss what to do with her scholars, now she had got them, if Richard and Flora had not marshalled them to the benches. Rough heads, torn garments, staring vacant eyes, and mouths gaping in shy rudeness, it was a sight to disenchant her of visions of pleasure in the work she had set herself. It was well that she had not to take the initiative. Mr. Wilmot said a few simple words to the mothers about the wish to teach their children what was right, and to do the best at present practicable, and then told the children that he hoped they would take pains to be good and mind what they were taught. Then he desired all to kneel down. He said the collect. Prevent us, O Lord, in all our doings, and then the Lord's Prayer. Ethel felt as if she could bear it better, and was more up to the work after this. Next, the children were desired to stand round the room, and Mr. Wilmot tried who could say the catechism. The 2 biggest, a boy and a girl, had not an idea of it, and the boy looked foolish and grinned at being asked what was his name. One child was tolerably perfect, and about half a dozen had some dim notions. 3 were entirely ignorant of the Lord's Prayer, and many of the others did not by any means pronounce the words of it. Jane and Fanny Taylor, Rebecca Watts, and Mrs. Green's little boy were the only ones who, by their own account, used morning and evening prayers, though, on further examination, it appeared that Polly and Jenny Hall, and some others, were accustomed to repeat the old rhyme about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Una McCarty and her little brother Fergus said something that nobody could make out, but which Mr. Wilmot thought had once been an Ave Maria. Some few of the children could read, and several more knew their letters. The least ignorant were selected to form a first class, and Mr. Wilmot promised a prayer book to the first, who should be able to repeat the catechism without a mistake, and a Bible to the first who could read a chapter in it. Then followed a setting of tasks, varying from a verse of a psalm, or the first answer in the catechism, down to the distinction between A, B, and C, all to be ready by next Tuesday, when, weather permitting, a second lesson was to be given. Afterwards, a piece of advice of Margaret's was followed, and Flora read aloud to the assembly the story of Margaret Fletcher. To some this seemed to give great satisfaction, especially to Una, but Ethel was surprised to see that many, and those not only little ones, talked and yawned. They had no power of attention even to a story, and the stillness was irksome to such wild colts. It was plain that it was time to leave off, and there was no capacity there which did not find the conclusion agreeable when the basket was opened and Ethel and Mary distributed the buns, with instructions to say thank you. The next Tuesday, some of the lessons were learned, Una's perfectly. The big ignorant boy came no more, and some of the children had learned to behave better, while others behaved worse. Ethel began to know what she was about. Richard's gentleness was eminently successful with the little girls, impressing good manners on them in a marvelous way, and Mary's importance and happiness with alphabet scholars, some bigger than herself, were edifying. Coxmore was fairly launched. The next memorable day was that of Margaret's being first carried downstairs. She had been willing to put it off as long as she could, dreading to witness the change below stairs, and feeling, too, that in entering on the family room, without power of leaving it, she was losing all quiet and solitude, as well as giving up that monopoly of her father in his evenings, which had been her great privilege. However, she tried to talk herself into liking it, and was rewarded by the happy commotion it caused, though Dr. May was in a state of excitement and nervousness at the prospect of seeing her on the stairs, and his attempts to conceal it only made it worse, till Margaret knew she should be nervous herself, and wished him out of sight and out of the house till it was over, for without him she had full confidence in the coolness and steadiness of Richard, and by him it was safely and quietly accomplished. She was landed on the sofa, Richard and Flora settling her, and the others crowding round and exclaiming, while the newness of the scene and the change gave her a sense of confusion, and she shut her eyes to recover her thoughts, but opened them the next instant at her father's exclamation that she was overcome, smiled to reassure him, and declared herself not tired, and to be very glad to be among them again. But the bustle was oppressive, and her cheerful manner was an effort. She longed to see them all gone, and Flora found it out, sent the children for their walk, and carried off Ethel and the brothers. Dr. May was called out of the room at the same time, and she was left alone. She gazed round her, at the room where, 4 months before, she had seen her mother with the babe in her arms. The children clustered round her, her father exulting in his hen and chicken daisies, herself full of bright, undefined hope, radiant with health and activity, and her one trouble such that she now knew the force of her mother's words, that it only proved her happiness. It was not till that moment that Margaret realized the change, found her eyes filling with tears, and as she looked round and saw the familiar furniture and ornaments. They were instantly checked as she heard her father returning, but not so that he did not perceive them, and exclaimed that it had been too much for her. "Oh, no, it was only the first time," said Margaret, losing the sense of the painful vacancy in her absorbing desire not to distress her father, and thinking only of him as she watched him stand for some minutes leaning on the mantel shelf, with his hand shading his forehead. She began to speak as soon as she thought he was ready to have his mind turned away. "How nicely Ritchie managed! He carried me so comfortably and easily. It is enough to spoil me to be so deftly waited on." "I'm glad of it," said Dr. May. "I am sure the change is better for you." But he came and looked at her still with great solicitude. "Ritchie can take excellent care of me," she continued, most anxious to divert his thoughts. "You see it will do very well indeed for you to take Harry to school." "I should like to do so. I should like to see his master and to take Norman with me," said the doctor. "It will be just the thing for him now. We would show him the dockyard and all those matters, and such a thorough holiday would set him up again. He is very much better, much better. He is recovering spirits and tone very fast. That leaf work of yours came at a lucky time. I like to see him looking out for a curious fern in the hedgerows. The pursuit has quite brightened him up." "And he does it so thoroughly," said Margaret. "Ethel fancies it is rather frivolous of him, I believe, but it amuses me to see how men give dignity to what women make trifling. He will know everything about the leaves, hunts up my botany books, and has taught me 100 times more of the construction and wonders of them than I ever learned." "Aye," said the doctor. "He has been talking a good deal to me about vegetable chemistry. He would make a good scientific botanist, if he were to be nothing else. I should be glad if he sticks to it as a pursuit. 'Tis pretty work, and I should like to have gone further with it, if I had ever had time for it." "I dare say he will," said Margaret. "It will be very pleasant if he can go with you. How he would enjoy the British Museum, if there was time for him to see it! Have you said anything to him yet?" "No, I waited to see how you were, as it all depends on that. I think it depends still more on something else, whether Norman is as fit to take care of you as Richard is." "That's another point. There's nothing but what he could manage now, but I don't like saying anything to him. I know he would undertake anything I wished without a word, and then, perhaps, dwell on it in fancy and force himself till it would turn to a perfect misery and upset his nerves again. I'm sorry for it. I meant him to have followed my trade, but he'll never do for that. However, he has wits enough to make himself what he pleases, and I dare say he will keep at the head of the school after all. How very good he has been in refraining from restlessness." "It's beautiful," said Dr. May, with strong emotion. "Poor boy! I trust he'll not be disappointed, and I don't think he will, but I've promised him I won't be annoyed if he should lose his place, so we must take especial care not to show any anxiety. However, for this matter, Margaret, I wish you would sound him and see whether it would be more pleasure or pain. Only mind you don't let him think that I shall be vexed. If he feels that he can't make up his mind, I would not have him fancy that for more than I can tell." This consultation revived the spirits of both, and the others returning found Margaret quite disposed for companionship. If to her the evening was sad and strange, like a visit in a dream to some old familiar haunt, finding all unnatural, to the rest it was delightful. The room was no longer dreary, now that there was a centre for care and attentions, and the party was no longer broken up. The sense of comfort, cheerfulness, and home gathering had returned, and the pleasant evening household gossip went round the table almost as it used to do. Dr. May resumed his old habit of skimming a club book and imparting the cream to the listeners, and Flora gave them some music, a great treat to Margaret, who had long only heard its distant sounds. Margaret found an opportunity of talking to Norman, and judged favorably. He was much pleased at the prospect of the journey and of seeing a ship, so as to have a clearer notion of the scene where Harry's life was to be spent, and though the charge of the arm was a drawback, he did not treat it as insurmountable. A few days' attendance in his father's room gave him confidence in taking Richard's place, and, accordingly, the third important measure was decided on, namely, that he and his father should accompany Harry to the naval school and be absent 3 nights. Some relations would be glad to receive them in London, and Alan Earnscliffe, who was studying steam navigation at Woolwich, volunteered to meet them and go with them to Portsmouth. It was a wonderful event. Norman and Harry had never been beyond Whitford in their lives, and none of the young ones could recollect their papas ever going from home for more than 1 night. Dr. May laughed at Margaret for her anxiety and excitement on the subject, and was more amused at overhearing Richard's precise directions to Norman over the packing up. "Hey, Richie," said the doctor, as he saw his portmanteau locked and the key given to Norman, "you may well look grave upon it. You won't see it look so tidy when it comes back again, and I believe you are thinking it will be lucky if you see it at all." There was a very affectionate leave-taking of Harry, who, growing rather soft-hearted, thought it needful to be disdainful, scolded Mary and Blanche for "lugging off his figurehead," and assured them they made as much work about it as if he was going to see it once. Then, to put an end to any more embraces, he marched off to the station with Tom, and nearly caused the others to be too late by the search for him that ensued. In due time, Dr. May and Norman returned, looking the better for the journey. There was, first, to tell of Harry's school and its master, and Alan Earnscliffe's introduction of him to a nice-looking boy of his own age. Then they were eloquent on the wonders of the dockyard, the Victory, the block machinery. And London. While Dr. May went to transact some business, Norman had been with Alan at the British Museum, and though he had intended to see half London besides, there was no tearing him away from the Elgin marbles, and nothing would serve him but bringing Dr. May the next morning to visit the 9 white bulls. Norman further said That whereas Papa could never go out of his house without meeting people who had something to say to him, it was the same elsewhere. 6 acquaintances he had met unexpectedly in London, and 2 at Portsmouth. So the conversation went on all the evening, to the great delight of all. It was more about things than people, though Flora inquired after Mr. Earnscliff, and was told he had met them at the station, had been everywhere with them, and had dined at the Mackenzies each day. How was he looking? Ethel asked, and was told pretty much the same as when he went away, and, on a further query from Flora, it appeared that an old naval friend of his father's had hopes of a ship, and had promised to have him with him, and thereupon warm hopes were expressed that Harry might have berth in the same. "And when is he coming here again, Papa?" said Ethel. "Eh? Oh, I can't tell. I say, isn't it high time to ring?" When they went up at night, everyone felt that half the say had not been said, and there were fresh beginnings on the stairs. Norman triumphantly gave the key to Richard, and then called to Ethel, "I say, won't you come into my room while I unpack?" "Oh, yes, I should like it very much." Ethel sat on the bed, rolled up in a cloak, while Norman undid his bag, announcing at the same time, "Well, Ethel, Papa says I may get to my Euripides to-morrow, if I please, and only work an hour at a time." "Oh, I am so glad. Then he thinks you quite well?" "Yes, I am quite well. I hope I've done with nonsense." "And how did you get on with his arm?" "Very well. He was so patient, and told me how to manage. You heard that Sir Matthew said it had got much better in these few weeks. Oh, here it is. There's a present for you." "Oh, thank you. From you or from Papa?" "This is mine. Papa has a present for everyone in his bag. He said, at last, that a man with 11 children hadn't need to go to London very often." "And you got this beautiful Lyra Innocentium for me? How very kind of you, Norman. It is just what I wished for. Such lovely binding, and those embossed edges to the leaves. Oh, they make a pattern as they open. I never saw anything like it." "I saw such a one on Miss Rivers's table, and asked Earnscliff where to get one like it. See, here's what my father gave me. Bishopkin's Manual. That is in readiness for the confirmation. Look, I begged him to put my name, though he said it was a pity to do it with his left hand. I didn't like to wait, so I asked him, at least, to write N.W. May and the date. And he has added Prov. 23, 24, 25. Let me look it out." She did so, and instead of reading it aloud, looked at Norman full of congratulation. "How it ought to make one " and there Norman broke off from the fullness of his heart. "I'm glad he put both verses," said Ethel presently. "How pleased with you he must be!" A silence while brother and sister both gazed intently at the crooked characters, till at last Ethel, with a long breath, resumed her ordinary tone, and said: "How well he has come to write with his left hand now." "Yes. Did you know that he wrote himself to tell Earnscliff Sir Matthew's opinion of Margaret?" "No. Did he?" "Do you know, Ethel," said Norman, as he knelt on the floor and tumbled miscellaneous articles out of his bag, "it is my belief that Earnscliff is in love with her, and that Papa thinks so." "Dear me!" cried Ethel, starting up. "That is famous! We should always have Margaret at home when he goes to sea." "But mind, Ethel, for your life you must not say one word to any living creature." "Oh, no, I promise you I won't, Norman, if you'll only tell me how you found it out." "What first put it in my head was the first evening, while I was undoing the portmanteau. My father leaned on the mantel shelf and sighed and muttered, 'Poor Earnscliff! I wish it may end well.' I thought he forgot that I was there so I would not seem to notice, but I soon saw it was that he meant." "How?" cried Ethel eagerly. "Oh, I don't know, by Allen's way." "Tell me. I want to know what people do when they are in love." "Nothing particular," said Norman, smiling. "Did you hear him inquire for her? How did he look?" "I can't tell. That was when he met us at the station before I thought of it, and I had to see to the luggage. But I'll tell you one thing, Ethel. When Papa was talking of her to Mrs. Mackenzie, at the other end of the room, all his attention went away in an instant from what he was saying, and once when Harry said something to me about her, he started and looked round so earnestly." "Oh, yes, that's like people in books. And did he colour?" "No, I don't recollect that he did," said Norman, "but I observed he never asked directly after her if he could help it, but always was trying to lead in some roundabout way to hearing what she was doing." "Did he call her Margaret?" "I watched, but to me he always said 'your sister,' and if he had to speak of her to papa he said 'Miss May.' And then you should have seen his attention to papa. I could hardly get a chance of doing anything for papa." "Oh, sure of it!" cried Ethel, clasping her hands. "But, poor man, how unhappy he must have been at having to go away when she was so ill." "Aye, the last time he saw her was when he carried her upstairs. Oh, dear! I hope he will soon come here again." "I don't suppose he will. Papa did not ask him." "Dear me, Norman! Why not? Isn't papa very fond of him? Why shouldn't he come?" "Don't you see, Ethel, that would be of no use while poor Margaret is no better. If he gained her affections, it would only make her unhappy." "Oh, but she is much better. She can raise herself up now without help, and sat up ever so long this morning without leaning back on her cushions. She is getting well. You know Sir Matthew said she would." "Yes, but I suppose papa thinks they had better say nothing till she is quite well." "And when she is? How famous it will be!" "Then there's another thing. He is very poor, you know." "I am sure papa doesn't care about people being rich." "I suppose Allen thinks he ought not to marry unless he can make his wife comfortable." "Look here, it would be all very easy. She should stay with us, and be comfortable here, and he go to sea, and get lots of prize money." "And that's what you call domestic felicity?" said Norman, laughing. "He might have her when he was at home," said Ethel. "No, no, that would never do," said Norman. "Do you think Earnscliff a man that would marry a wife for her father to maintain her? Why, papa would like it very much. He is not a mercenary father in a book." "Hey, what's that?" said a voice Ethel little expected. "Contraband talk at contraband times? What's this?" "Did you hear, papa?" said Ethel, looking down. "Only your last words, as I came up to ask Norman what he had done with my pocketbook. Mind, I asked no impertinent questions, but, if you have no objections, I should like to know what gained me the honour of that compliment." "Norman?" said Ethel, interrogatively, and blushing in emulation of a brother, who was crimson. "I'll find it," said he, rushing off with a sort of nod and sign that conveyed to Ethel that there was no help for it. So, with much confusion, she whispered into her papa's ear that Norman had been telling her something he guessed about Mr. Earnscliff. Her father at first smiled, a pleased, amused smile. "Ah, ha! So Master June has his eyes and ears open, has he? A fine bit of gossip to regale you with on his return." "He told me to say not one word," said Ethel. "Right, mind you don't," said Doctor May, and Ethel was surprised to see how sorrowful his face became. At the same moment Norman returned still very red and said: "I put out the pocketbook, papa. I think I should tell you I repeated what, perhaps, you did not mean me to hear. You talked to yourself something of pitying Earnscliff." The doctor smiled again at the boy's high-minded openness, which must have cost an effort of self-humiliation. "I can't say little pitchers have long ears to a maypole like you, Norman," said he. "I think I ought rather to apologize for having inadvertently tumbled in among your secrets. I assure you I did not come to spy on you." "Oh, no, 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 no!" repeated Ethel, vehemently. "Then you didn't mind our talking about it?" "Of course not, as long as it goes no farther. It is the use of sisters to tell them one's private sentiments. Is not it, Norman?" "And do you really think it is so, papa?" Ethel could not help whispering. "I'm afraid it is," said Doctor May, sighing. Then, as he caught her earnest eyes: "The more I see of Allen the finer fellow I think him, and the more sorry I am for him. It seems presumptuous, almost wrong, to think of the matter at all while my poor Margaret is in this state, and, if she were well, there are other difficulties which would, perhaps, prevent his speaking, or lead to long years of waiting and wearing out hope." "Money?" said Ethel. "Aye, though I so far deserve your compliment, miss, that should be foolish enough, if she were but well, to give my consent to morrow because I could not help it. Yet one can't live 46 years in this world without seeing it is wrong to marry without a reasonable dependence, and there won't be much among 11 of you. It makes my heart ache to think of it, come what may, as far as I can see, and without her to judge. The only comfort is, that poor Margaret herself knows nothing of it, and is at peace so far. It will be ordered for them anyhow. Good night, my dear." Ethel sought her room, with graver, deeper thoughts of life than she had carried upstairs. End of Part 1, Chapter 17. Recording by Nancy Cochran Gergen, Gilbert, Arizona.